The room went quiet the moment Shaq finally said it out loud. When the biggest personality in basketball shifts from playful shade to a serious indictment, people tend to listen closely. This wasn't the usual late-night sports drama that fans casually scroll past at 2 in the morning. It was the kind of moment that makes headlines, sparks debate on talk shows, and forces commentators to rethink their talking points. Shaq didn't throw out a quick hot take and walk away. He stayed there, leaned toward the camera, and explained in blunt, old-school terms why he believes LeBron James doesn't command the same level of fear and reverence that legends like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant once did. That single idea, that the modern king of the game earns respect but not dread, became the spark for a much larger conversation. Once people hear Shaq's reasoning, it becomes hard to ignore the logic behind it, which is why the reaction ranges from agreement to frustration to heated arguments in comment sections everywhere. In simple terms, Shaq's argument has two sharp edges: style and substance. On the style side, he keeps circling back to one central complaint: LeBron's overall vibe. Shaq points to the pre-game dances, the social media-ready moments, the camera-friendly warm-ups, and an aura that sometimes feels more like a celebrity press tour than the calm before competitive destruction. In Shaq's words, LeBron often comes across like a goofy kid, and when the discussion is about intimidation, that phrase cuts deeply. For Shaq and for a generation of players who built their reputations through intense stare-downs, brutal practices, and a constant willingness to punish opponents both physically and mentally, the idea of the game turning into something resembling a red carpet spectacle feels uncomfortable. The old-school viewpoint is brutally simple. If your opponents don't fear you, then you don't possess the psychological advantage that true legends once carried. In Shaq's definition, greatness looks like inevitability, showing up on the court with such overwhelming dominance that opposing teams immediately change their entire game plan because they know their night is about to be ruined. From that perspective, he argues that LeBron's modern celebrity-first presentation softens the very weapon that once made basketball's greatest players so intimidating.
In your prime, do you think you could beat LeBron and AD, you and Kobe?
Do I think or do I know? Yes, the answer is yes. I mean, because there's only one contributing factor. Who's going to guard me?
That's right. No one can do that.
No, they cannot.
That's right.
The other side of Shaquille O'Neal's argument moves beyond style and into what he believes is the deeper issue: the substance of how greatness is built. According to Shaq, the real difference between generations isn't just personality or pre-game theatrics. It's the philosophy of winning itself. In his view, LeBron James represents a completely new blueprint for success in the NBA. Instead of simply overpowering opponents year after year, the modern approach focuses on optimization and opportunity. If the current situation doesn't lead to championships, you change the situation. Form a super team, reshape the roster, choose the ideal teammates, manage media narratives, and play the long strategic game while your statistics continue to grow. Shaq contrasts that with the older philosophy he lived by, where greatness meant grinding opponents down, winning through sheer force, and dominating a specific era so completely that rivals had no choice but to adapt to you. To him, there's something uncomfortable about watching a legacy develop through carefully constructed circumstances rather than through breaking opponents at their peak. That's why he repeatedly returns to a simple but powerful question: did LeBron rise to the top because he made players fear him, or because he mastered the system and outlasted everyone within it? Shaq insists that this criticism isn't driven by jealousy or bitterness about scoring records or longevity. Instead, he frames it as a cultural argument about the psychological power required to command a locker room and dominate an era. When he says he feared Michael Jordan or that players feared Kobe Bryant, he isn't just referring to trophies or championships. He's describing a psychological reality where opponents altered entire game plans because those players created an overwhelming sense of pressure. For Shaq, fear has nothing to do with popularity or branding. It comes from the certainty that when you face a certain player, the game will become painful, exhausting, and nearly impossible to survive. By that measure, he argues that LeBron's carefully managed career, polished, strategic, and incredibly successful, hasn't produced the same legendary stories of intimidation that players from earlier eras still talk about decades later. Whether people agree or disagree, that distinction shifts the entire greatest of all time conversation away from statistics and toward something less measurable: atmosphere, presence, and the emotional impact a player creates on the court. To support his argument, Shaq points to iconic moments of intimidation that defined earlier eras. Jordan's icy stare that seemed to freeze arenas, Kobe's relentless competitive obsession, and the way opposing players mentally braced themselves before certain matchups because they knew the outcome would likely be brutal. He compares that with modern NBA culture, where pre-game routines often include choreographed dances, smiles for cameras, and a strong emphasis on entertainment. Shaq also highlights how LeBron has repeatedly reshaped his competitive environments through high-profile free agency moves, carefully assembled super teams, and media-savvy decisions rather than relying solely on raw dominance over opponents. On top of that, Shaq points to major changes within the league itself. Rule adjustments encouraging freedom of movement, increased three-point shooting, wider floor spacing, and stronger protections for players. In his view, these developments have created a game that rewards skill, longevity, and efficiency while making the kind of brute force dominance he represents far less common. This perspective resonates with many longtime fans who quietly feel that basketball has shifted away from raw competition and toward spectacle. For them, the concern isn't just about one player. It's about whether the spirit of the sport has been replaced by a mixture of entertainment, branding, and highlight culture. When Shaq references the era of dramatic free agency decisions and superstar team building, he's criticizing more than LeBron's choices. He's challenging a broader cultural transformation in which player autonomy and brand building sometimes replace the old expectation of grinding through adversity with a single team until a championship is earned. Yet even within that criticism, a balanced view must acknowledge LeBron's powerful counterargument. His career represents one of the most remarkable combinations of longevity, adaptability, and statistical excellence the sport has ever seen. Over 2 decades, he has transformed multiple franchises, influenced markets across the league, and used his platform to become a cultural figure far beyond basketball itself. For younger players raised in the era of analytics, load management, and global sports media, LeBron's strategy doesn't appear manipulative. It looks like mastery. He understood how the modern NBA works and adjusted his career to thrive within it. Where Shaq sees calculated maneuvering, others see intelligence and leadership in a complex sports ecosystem. This raises a fundamental question that sits at the center of the debate. Is fear the only valid measurement of greatness, or can greatness also include adaptability, longevity, and cultural influence? Beneath the argument lies a deeper generational tension. The clash between Shaq and LeBron isn't just about 2 athletes. It reflects 2 different ideas of what excellence should look like. One philosophy celebrates relentless intensity, intimidation, and physical dominance. The other celebrates strategic thinking, career management, and the ability to succeed within an evolving system. Because the NBA often mirrors larger cultural shifts, this debate extends beyond basketball itself. It shapes how coaches evaluate talent, how teams build rosters, and how young athletes imagine their careers in a world shaped by social media and global branding. Shaq understands that legacy is not just about what happens during a career but also about how that career is remembered. His comments are not random criticism. They are an attempt to influence how future generations interpret this era of basketball. If fans ultimately accept Shaq's fear-based definition of greatness, LeBron's legacy might be viewed less as the unquestioned greatest of all time case and more as the story of a brilliant strategist who mastered the modern NBA. If the broader definition of greatness prevails, one that includes cultural impact, adaptability, and longevity, then LeBron's place in history only grows stronger. In the end, the debate circles back to the same powerful question Shaq keeps asking. Do opponents fear LeBron the way they feared Jordan or Kobe? That single question has the ability to compress decades of basketball evolution into one emotional test. Yet behind Shaq's criticism lies something deeply human. Nostalgia for a different era of sports, one where relentless intensity and intimidation defined greatness. Whether that standard should remain the ultimate measure of basketball excellence is still open to debate, but the emotional force behind Shaq's argument resonates strongly with a large portion of fans. The challenge now falls to everyone watching the debate unfold. Decide which definition of greatness you believe in, examine the evidence, and determine whether dominance should be measured by fear alone or by the many different ways a player can reshape the game.